In the start of the movie, we see that a former rock star has been murdered in cold blood, and the police including Detective Nick is called in to investigate. Nick and his partner Gus join the others in investigating the crime. There, we also see Captain Talcott and the forensics team already working. On the bed is the victim's blood-covered body with his hands tied to the beds with a white scarf. Nick and Gus learn that the time of death was just a few hours ago, and then Walker informs them the victim was last seen leaving the club with his girlfriend around midnight. When Nick asks for the murder weapon, one of the detectives gives him an ice pick used for the murder. While Nick tries to make jokes about the victim's death, the captain stops him and tells him that the victim was a respectable man. Nick then asks Walker for the name of Johnny's girlfriend, and he replies that it's Catherine, before giving Nick her address. Nick and Gus go ahead to visit Catherine's home. When they get there, they meet a blonde woman and inform her that they have a few questions for her, while the woman asks them if they're from the Vice Squad. Nick answers that they're from the Homicide Division. Then Gus asks the woman when she last saw the victim. The woman goes ahead to ask them if the victim is dead, but Gus asks to know what makes her think that, and she casually retorts that they wouldn't be there otherwise. She eventually tells them that she's not Catherine but Roxy, so she gives them the address they should head to. When they get to the address, Nick and Gus find Catherine smoking on the balcony. After Nick introduces himself and Gus to her, she tells them that she knows who they are before asking them how the victim died. When they explains that he was murdered with an ice pick, she smiles, and they ask her how long she's been dating the victim. She retorts that they weren't dating, and she was just sleeping with him for fun. She tells them that she and the victim had a drink at the club, then left together, but she didn't go home with him. When Nick continues with the interrogation, Catherine taunts him and asks that she be arrested or they should leave her house. After his interview with Catherine, Nick goes to his psychologist Dr. Beth Garner's office. When asked how everything's going on with his life, Nick admits that his dating life has become boring since they stopped dating, adding that he hasn't had a drink in a while. After completing the session with her, Nick tells her to inform the Internal Affairs Department that he's alright, and then she agrees. When the officers are being briefed later in the day, Nick and Gus are told that the victim sustained 31 stab wounds during his murder. They are also told there are no traceable prints in the room, and they also found a white scarf in the room that was used to tie the victim. After hearing the report on the victim's death, Gus asks to know more about Catherine. They are told that she has a clean record and a graduate in literature and psychology. Her parents were killed in a boating accident while she was young, leaving her the sole heir to their estimated assets of $110 million. Catherine was also engaged to Manuel Vasquez, a former middleweight contender, who was killed in the ring. They are also told that Catherine is a writer and has written a novel under a pen name about a former rock and roll star who gets murdered by his girlfriend. Afterwards, Nick reads Catherine's novel while at home, then he calls his partner to tell him that in the book, the murderer killed the victim using an ice pick, with the victim's hands tied to the bed with a white scarf. The next day, Nick and Gus go to Catherine's house to invite her for questioning, and while waiting for her, Nick sees an old newspaper containing the article about his involvement with shooting 2 tourists. On the way to the station, Gus inquires if she's writing another book, to which she says yes. She tells him, it's about a detective who falls for the wrong woman. Curious, Nick asks her what happens to the detective, and then Catherine replies that the woman will kill him. At the station, Nick informs everyone that Catherine has waived her rights to an attorney, as she's confident that she has nothing to hide. Assistant District Attorney John starts the investigation, and then Catherine gives provocative answers while smoking. When Walker questions her about the white silk scarf she described in her book, Catherine expresses her preference for such scarves. Trying to be straightforward, John asks Catherine if she killed the victim. Catherine claims she wouldn't be stupid enough to kill someone the way she described it in her novel. She continues taunting the detectives, and then she offers to take a lie detector test, to which she passes with flying colors. With no proof that she committed murder, Catherine is set free by the men. When she asks if anyone could drive her home, Nick volunteers without hesitation. After taking Catherine home, Nick goes to the bar with his colleagues to drink. Curious about Catherine and Nick's relationship, Walker asks him why Catherine seems so interested in him. Since Nick knows where this is going, he makes it clear to Walter that he and Catherine don't know each other. Nick takes a drink even though he's trying to stay sober, then he tells Walker not see Catherine as innocent. He asks Walker to consider the death of Catherine's parents and the books she's published, asserting that all of her books might have a way of coming true. However, Walker dismisses his claims as baseless. While still talking about Catherine, Beth suddenly shows up at the bar. With her watching from afar, one of Nick's colleagues Nielsen mocks him for drinking while on therapy. This pisses Nick off, so he warns Nielsen to leave him alone, spurring Beth quickly stop the fight. Nick and Beth then leave the bar together for her place, where they eventually make love. While they are talking about Catherine, Beth tells Nick that she and Catherine went to the same school and also shared classes together. In another briefing, the detectives discover that one of Catherine's professor was murdered in his bed with an ice pick in 1980. When Nick asks if Catherine was there at that time, Walker confirms that she was. Following this lead, Walker orders the detectives to find out more about her books and the death of her parents, while Nick is tasked to focus on Catherine herself. While Nick is following Catherine, he finds her in the house of a woman named Hazel Dobkin. When he gets back to the station, he does some digging on Hazel Dobkins and finds out that she was charged with killing her entire family, but she was released from prison years ago. While Nick is researching, Gus suddenly shows up and informs him that the dead professor was Catherine's counselor while in school. When Gus reads Hazel Dobkin's name on the monitor, he tells Nick that she murdered her husband and 3 young children years ago. She didn't even deny the murder, but she told the court she had no reasons for doing it. Nick eventually goes back to Catherine's house to ask her some questions. As they go inside, he sees the old newspapers about him shooting 2 tourists. When he tries to ask her about the newspapers, Catherine tells him that she's using him as an inspiration for the main character in her new book. Nick asks her about her murdered professor and Hazel Dobkins. Catherine says that the professor was her counselor during her freshman year. She also says that Hazel's is her new friend who has helped her understand more about homicidal impulse. Catherine tries to learn more about Nick's shooting incident, all while seducing him, but this provokes Nick, who pushes her away. Roxy shows up, and the two kiss in front of an angered Nick, showing that Catherine is bisexual. Still outraged, he heads to Beth's office and demands her to tell him who has access to his files, and she says it's Nielsen. Nick confronts Nielsen and accuses him of selling his file to Catherine, but Nielsen denies it. Their colleagues eventually come in and break up the fight, then Nick leaves the office. Gus catches up to his car, and Nick claims that Catherine knows everything about him and that she's coming for him. Later in the night, Beth visits Nick in his apartment, and the two get into an argument which results to a physical fight because of Nielsen. When Beth finally calms down, she tells Nick that she had to give Nielsen his files because of a good cause, but she didn't know he had other plans. Still angry with Beth, Nick just asks her to leave. A while later, Nick is called to a murder scene, where he sees Nielsen has been killed inside his car. Nick is taken in for questioning afterwards, then he admits that he lost his temper, but he never killed Nielsen. Beth then shows up and tells everyone that she was at Nick's apartment the previous night. The captain eventually puts Nick on leave because of his behavior. When Nick gets home, he finds Catherine waiting for him outside. He invites her for a drink in his apartment, then asks how much she paid Nielsen for his files, but Catherine changes the conversation. Before finally leaving Nick's place, Catherine tells him that she'll be at a club in the evening, just in case he wants to find her. That night, Nick goes to Johnny's club and finds Catherine and Roxy. They both meet up on the dance floor, then they eventually go home and spend the night getting intimate. One day, while the two are together, Catherine tells Nick about a girl she slept with in college. She asserts that the girl Lisa Oberman started following her around, imitated the way she dressed, and even dyed her hair to be like hers. Hearing this, Nick goes to Catherine's school to look for Lisa's records. Afterwards, he asks Andrews for help, then he learns that Lisa Hoberman is actually Beth Garner. Nick confronts Beth at her apartment, and then she admits that she slept with Catherine once. Beth insists that Catherine had developed a fixation with her, and that she was the one imitating the way she looked and dressed. Fed up with the stories, Nick leaves Beth to go home. He sees Catherine in his apartment, and he confronts her about her story involving Beth. She sticks to her side of the story, claiming that she even filed a report against Beth. Afterwards, Nick makes further investigation, then he realizes that Beth was married before. Her husband died years ago and his murder is yet to be unsolved. Later on, Gus picks up Nick to visit Catherine's roommate in Oakland from her freshman year. According to Gus, the woman knows a lot about Catherine and Beth. Upon reaching their destination, Gus goes to the suite while Nick stays in the car. While in the car, Nick suddenly remembers Catherine's book. He runs for the hotel to save his friend, but as soon he reaches there, Gus has been repeatedly stabbed with an ice pick. When he hears a sound from afar, Nick takes Gus' gun and sees Beth in the hallway, who claims that she received a message to meet Gus there. Nick points the gun at her and warns her not to move, announcing that he knows about her husband. Despite his warnings, Beth starts walking toward him with her hand in her pocket. Feeling that she might be wielding a gun, Nick shoots Beth, only to find out that she was playing with her keychain. The authorities arrive at the scene, and as Walker starts questioning Nick, he is called by Andrews to the stairs, where they find a blonde wig, an ice pick, and a coat that belongs to the police department. When they check Beth's apartment, they find the same gun used in killing Nilsson, along with other things that implicates her in other murders. Nick is eventually congratulated by his captain for solving the murder case, but the death of his friend still pains him a lot. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to help the channel out.